The neon sign of the Route 9 diner buzzed and flickered against the howling darkness, its red and blue glow fighting a losing battle against the Montana blizzard. Snow whipped across the empty highway, erasing tire tracks within minutes, transforming the road into a blank white canvas. The temperature had plunged to 15 below zero. No cars had passed in 3 hours. Inside, Sarah Miller wiped down the last table with slow mechanical movements, her body on autopilot while her mind wandered. 5 years of working the night shift in this desolate stretch had taught her the rhythm of solitude. The diner should have closed 2 hours ago, but the storm had trapped her here, alongside the ghosts that always seemed to lurk in the corners of empty places. Wind screamed against the windows, rattling the glass in its frame. Sarah pulled her coat from the hook by the door, her fingers fumbling with the zipper. The old building's heater struggled against the cold, seeping through every crack. Her breath formed visible clouds. 5 more minutes and she'd brave the short walk to her truck. 5 more minutes of safety before facing the storm. Then she heard it, a sound so faint she thought she'd imagined it. A cry, weak and desperate, almost consumed by the howling wind. Sarah froze one arm in her coat sleeve. She tilted her head, listening. Nothing but the storm. She shook her head, pulling her coat on fully. Isolation played tricks on the mind. But there it was again, a small, frightened wail cutting through the blizzard's roar. Jesus, she whispered, her pulse quickening. Every logical part of her brain screamed to ignore it. Going outside meant risking frostbite or worse. The temperature was lethal. Visibility near zero. Common sense said to stay inside. But that sound grabbed something deep in her chest and twisted. She knew desperation when she heard it. Sarah yanked open this door. The storm hit like a physical force, snow blasting her face and stinging her eyes. She squinted into the white chaos, searching for movement, for anything. Hello? Her voice vanished, torn away instantly by the wind. The crying came again, weaker now, from somewhere to her left. Sarah stumbled off the diner's small porch, her boots sinking into knee-deep snow. The cold bit through her jeans, immediately burning her skin. She pushed forward, following the sound, each step an exercise in determination. 20 feet from the diner, she nearly fell into it. A car crumpled against an embankment, half buried in snow. The front end was accordioned against a concrete barrier. How long had it been there? How had she not heard the crash? The crying was coming from inside. Hold on, Sarah shouted, though she doubted anyone could hear her. She reached the passenger side and wiped frantically at the snow-covered window. Through the ice, she saw movement. Something small wrapped in blankets in a car seat in the back. A baby. The driver's side was crushed inward, the airbag deployed and stained dark. Sarah could see a silhouette slumped over the wheel, motionless. Her stomach lurched. She yanked at the passenger door. Locked. The back door, too. Her fingers were already going numb. The baby's cries grew weaker, more desperate. No, no, no. Sarah looked around wildly. She spotted a chunk of broken concrete near the barrier and grabbed it with both hands. Without hesitating, she slammed it against the passenger window. Once. Twice. On the third, hit the glass spiderwebbed. The fourth blow shattered it inward. Sarah reached through, unlocking the door and wrenching it open. The interior light flickered on, and her worst fears were confirmed. The woman in the driver's seat was young, maybe 25. Her head rested against the deployed airbag at an unnatural angle, blood frozen across her temple. Her eyes were open but empty, staring at nothing. Sarah had seen death before, 5 years ago in another car on another dark road. She knew it instantly. I'm sorry, Sarah whispered, her throat tight. I'm so sorry. The baby's cry jerked her back to action. She reached into the back seat, her frozen fingers struggling with the car seat straps. The infant was bundled in a pink blanket, but its lips were turning blue. Its tiny face was red from crying, the sound growing fainter. Come on, sweetheart. Come on. Sarah's hands shook as she finally freed the car seat and lifted it out. The wind nearly knocked her over as she turned toward the diner. The light seemed impossibly far away, a flickering beacon swallowed by sheets of blinding snow. Sarah tucked the car seat against her chest, hunching over it to shield the baby from the worst of the storm. Her legs burned as she pushed through the drifts, each step an agony of cold and effort. She didn't know how long it took to reach the door, 30 seconds or 30 minutes. Time had stopped meaning anything. Then she was inside, slamming the door behind her. The sudden warmth of the diner burned her frozen skin. The baby had stopped crying. No, no, wake up. Please wake up. Sarah set the car seat on the nearest table and unwrapped the blankets with clumsy, shaking hands. The infant was a girl, maybe 6 months old, her skin pale and cold to the touch. Sarah pressed her ear to the tiny chest, a heartbeat faint but there. She had to warm her up fast. Her mind raced. The first aid training she'd gotten years ago seemed useless now. She grabbed every clean towel from behind the counter and wrapped them around the baby, then carried her to the kitchen. The coffee pot's heating plate was still on. She turned it to maximum and held the bundle near it, not too close, just enough to radiate warmth. "Come on, baby. Come on." Sarah rubbed the tiny hands gently, trying to get circulation going. "You're okay. You're safe now." Minutes crawled by. Sarah kept warming, rubbing, whispering encouragement. Her own body shook from adrenaline crash and residual cold, but she didn't stop. Then a whimper, weak but real. The baby's eyes fluttered open, unfocused and confused. Then she began to cry again, a stronger, angrier sound, the most beautiful noise Sarah had ever heard. That's it, sweetheart. You cry all you want." Tears streamed down Sarah's face, hot against her frozen cheeks. She cradled the baby close, still wrapped in towels, and sank into a chair. Outside, the storm raged on. The phone lines were dead. She'd already checked. Her cell had no signal. The highway was impassable. They were alone until morning at the earliest. Sarah looked down at the baby, now sucking on her tiny fist, color slowly returning to her cheeks. In those dark eyes, she saw something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in 5 years, a second chance. She thought about the woman in the car, a mother who'd driven into a storm and never made it out. About another car, another storm 5 years ago, when Sarah had been behind the wheel, when her brother had been in the passenger seat, when everything had shattered. "I've got you now," Sarah whispered to the baby. "I promise." She didn't know that this promise would bring 200 motorcycles to her door. She didn't know that this one act of mercy would drag her into a world of violence, loyalty, and redemption. She didn't know that the baby she held belonged to one of the most dangerous men in Montana. All she knew was that for the first time in 5 years, she'd saved a life instead of taking one. And maybe, just maybe, that counted for something. The old pocket watch lay heavy in Sarah Miller's jacket. It hadn't kept proper time in years. The glass face cracked from the impact that had killed her brother Matthew. Yet she carried it everywhere, a constant reminder of the price of her mistakes. As she rocked the baby girl in her arms, Sarah's fingers absently traced the watch's cold metal edge, an unconscious ritual whenever she faced a moment of consequence. 5 years earlier, one too many drinks at a college reunion. The choice to drive home instead of calling a cab. A patch of black ice. Her brother's voice saying, "Maybe I should drive Sar." Then the headlights, the skid, the impact. Matthew had been 28, a music teacher, with a gift for seeing the best in everyone, especially his sister. Now all that remained was this broken timepiece pulled from his pocket at the hospital when they'd asked Sarah to identify the body. Dawn broke gray and cold over Route 9. The storm had exhausted itself, leaving behind a landscape of white silence. Sarah hadn't slept. She'd spent the night feeding the baby sugar water from a clean eyedropper, keeping her warm singing songs she half remembered from her own childhood. The infant whom she'd been calling sweetheart all night had finally fallen into a peaceful sleep in a makeshift bed of towels inside an empty storage crate. Sarah was mixing another batch of sugar water when she heard the engines. 2 sheriff's vehicles and an ambulance carved through the snowdrifts, their lights flashing red and blue against the white. Sarah's chest tightened. She'd known they'd come eventually, but now that they were here, she felt a strange reluctance to let the baby go. Sheriff Frank Wilson was first through the door, his weathered face creased with concern. At 55, Frank carried himself with the rigid posture of his 30 years in law enforcement and earlier military service. His eyes found Sarah first, then the makeshift crib. "Sarah, we got a distress signal from a car's emergency system around midnight. Took us till now to reach this stretch." His eyes found the baby in the crate. "Jesus Christ, is that?" "She's okay," Sarah said quickly. "Cold when I found her, but she's okay now." 2 paramedics rushed past her to the baby. Sarah stepped back, wrapping her arms around herself as they began their examination. She felt suddenly hollow watching them work. "There was a woman," she said quietly, "in the car. She didn't make it." Frank's face darkened. He radioed something to his deputy, then turned back to Sarah. "You went out in that storm." His tone was gruff, but held an undercurrent of respect. "That was stupid, Sarah." "I know," she managed a weak smile, "but I heard her crying." "That was brave." Frank put a hand on her shoulder, a gesture so unexpected that Sarah nearly flinched. In 5 years, the sheriff had never been anything but professionally distant, like everyone else in town, once they'd learned who she was, what she'd done. One of the paramedics, a young woman with kind eyes, approached them. "She's stable. Mild hypothermia, but no frostbite. Another hour out there." She didn't finish the sentence. "You did good, really good." "I'm riding with her," Sarah said. It wasn't a question. Frank nodded. "Ambulance will take you both to County General. Get that hand looked at, too." Sarah glanced down at her right hand. The skin was mottled red and white frostbite from when she'd broken the window. She hadn't even felt it. The ride to the hospital was a blur. Sarah sat in the back of the ambulance watching the paramedics work, watching the baby's tiny chest rise and fall. They'd wrapped her in thermal blankets, started an IV. Professional, efficient, gentle. At the hospital, they tried to separate them. Sarah refused to leave until she knew the baby was truly safe. A nurse finally brought her to a treatment room where a doctor examined her hand, talking about nerve damage and applying ointment that burned like fire. "You'll keep full function," the doctor said. "But you're lucky, another 10 minutes of exposure." "I know," Sarah interrupted. She'd heard enough about what could have happened. Sheriff Wilson found her in the waiting area an hour later. His expression had changed, harder, now guarded. He sat heavily beside her. "The woman in the car was Rebecca Carter," he said, his voice low. "Does that name mean anything to you?" Sarah shook her head. "She was married to Marcus Carter. They call him Wolf." Frank watched her face carefully. "Leader of the Black Wind Riders. You heard of them." Something cold settled in Sarah's stomach. "The motorcycle club, the one under federal investigation for trafficking, racketeering, and about a dozen other charges." "Yeah." Frank rubbed his face. "Wolf just got out of prison 3 weeks ago. Manslaughter charge. Did 18 months. Sarah looked toward the pediatric ward where they'd taken the baby. "That's his daughter. Lily, that's her name. Lily Carter." Frank leaned forward, his voice dropping even lower. "FBI's been watching Rebecca for months. They think she was running. From what or who they won't say, but a woman doesn't drive into a blizzard at midnight for no reason. She was trying to protect her baby," Sarah said softly, understanding blooming in her chest. "A mother's last, desperate act." "Maybe." Frank stood. "Look, the press is going to be all over this by tomorrow. Waitress saves infant in blizzard. It's a good story, but there are parts they don't need to know." He paused. "Parts about your record." "The baby's safe," Sarah said, standing. "That's what matters." But as she walked toward the exit, her legs unsteady with exhaustion, she couldn't shake the image of Rebecca Carter's frozen face. A mother who died protecting her child. Sarah had taken a life 5 years ago, her own brother's, through recklessness and stupidity. Now she'd saved one. The universe was offering her something. She wasn't sure if it was redemption or a reckoning. Outside, fresh snow had begun to fall. Sarah pulled her coat tight and headed for the parking lot where her old truck waited. She didn't notice the black motorcycle parked 3 spaces down, or the man in leather watching her from behind tinted sunglasses. She didn't know that Wolf Carter had already heard about the waitress who'd saved his daughter, or that he was coming for her. The story hit the local news by evening. By the next morning, it had gone regional. By day 3, Sarah's face was everywhere. "Local hero waitress risks life to save infant in blizzard." Sarah stared at the newspaper lying on the diner counter, her own photo staring back, taken from her employee file years old. She looked younger in it, less tired. The bell above the door hadn't stopped chiming. People she'd served coffee to for 5 years suddenly treated her like something fragile and precious. Strangers drove out from town just to shake her hand. A woman from the Methodist church brought a casserole. Someone left flowers on the diner steps. Sarah hated every second of it. "You're famous," said Laura, the morning shift cook, grinning as she flipped pancakes. "My daughter saw you on Facebook. 15,000 shares." "Great," Sarah muttered, refilling the coffee pot. But fame was a double-edged blade, and the second edge cut deeper. By day 2, someone had found her criminal record. By day 3, the headlines had shifted. "Hero waitress has dark past, DUI killed her brother 5 years ago." From tragedy to triumph, ex-con's road to redemption. Sarah stopped reading after that. She'd unplugged her home phone. She'd started parking behind the diner to avoid the news vans that occasionally cruised past. Now on the 4th morning of the storm, she was alone in the diner at 5 a.m., preparing for the breakfast rush and trying to pretend the world hadn't turned her inside out. The rumble of a motorcycle made her freeze. Then another and another. Sarah moved to the window and pulled back the curtain. 3 motorcycles sat in the parking lot, their riders standing beside them. black leather chrome gleaming in the pre-dawn light. They weren't doing anything threatening, just standing there looking at the diner. Her hand trembled as she reached for the phone. "Sheriff's Department," Frank answered on the second ring. "Frank, there are bikers outside the diner." A pause. "What kind of bikers?" "The kind with skull patches on their jackets." "Lock the doors. I'm 10 minutes out." Sarah locked the doors and retreated behind the counter, her heart hammering. Through the window, she watched the bikers. They didn't approach, didn't leave, just waited. When Frank arrived, sirens off but lights flashing, the bikers mounted their motorcycles and left without a word. "Black Wind Riders," Frank confirmed, standing in the diner with his hand on his holster. "Bottom Rocker," said Montana chapter. "What do they want?" Sarah asked, though she already knew. Frank looked at her for a long moment. "Wolf Carter got out of prison. Word is he's been looking into what happened to Rebecca and who saved his daughter." "I just did what anyone would." "Sarah," Frank cut her off gently, "these aren't anyone. The Black Wind Riders don't forget debts, good or bad." That night, Sarah returned to her trailer on the edge of town. It was a rusted single-wide she rented for $400 a month, all she could afford on diner wages. She'd lived there since her release, keeping her head down, staying invisible. So much for invisible. She was unlocking her door when she noticed a single white lily lying on her doorstep. No note, no card, just the flower perfect and pristine against the dirty snow. Sarah picked it up with shaking hands and looked around. The trailer park was quiet, just the wind rattling through chain-link fences and the distant sound of the highway. Someone had been here. Someone knew where she lived. Inside, she locked every lock and pulled the curtains. She put the lily in a glass of water because throwing it away felt wrong somehow. Then she sat on her threadbare couch in the dark. Her phone still plugged in buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Thank you for saving my daughter. I'm coming to pay my respects. W." Sarah stared at the message until her eyes blurred. She should call Frank. She should leave town. She should do anything except sit here waiting for a biker gang leader to show up on her doorstep. But she thought about Rebecca Carter's frozen face, about Lily's tiny fingers clutching her thumb in the ambulance, about the lily on her doorstep, a gesture that felt more like reverence than threat. She texted back with trembling fingers when the response came immediately. "Soon, don't be afraid." Sarah laughed, a short, bitter sound in the darkness of her trailer. Don't be afraid, as if fear was a choice, as if she hadn't been afraid every day for 5 years, waiting for the universe to collect what she owed for her brother's death. Maybe this was it. Maybe Wolf Carter wasn't coming to thank her. Maybe he was coming to even the scales. Outside in the distance, Sarah heard the low rumble of motorcycles. Not close, not yet, but coming. They came on the 6th day. Sarah was pouring coffee for a trucker when she heard it. A sound like distant thunder growing steadily louder. Conversations died mid-sentence. Forks clattered against plates. Everyone in the diner turned toward the windows. The rumble became a roar. They appeared on Route 9 like a black river flowing down the highway in perfect formation. 2 by 2 stretching back farther than Sarah could see. Motorcycles. Dozens of them. No hundreds. "Sweet Jesus," the trucker whispered. The lead bikes turned into the diner parking lot. Then the next pair, and the next. They kept coming, filling every available space, spilling onto the shoulder of the highway. The sound was deafening even through the windows, a symphony of engines that shook the building's foundation. People were already fleeing. The trucker threw money on the counter and hurried out the back. A family with 2 kids scrambled for their minivan. Within 60 seconds, Sarah was alone in the diner. Just her and 200 bikers outside. She should run. She should call Frank. She should do anything except stand frozen behind the counter, watching through the window as the engines cut off one by one, leaving a silence that felt even more terrifying than the noise. The bikers dismounted. Black leather and denim patches and chains. Men and women, young and old, all wearing the same insignia, a skull with a crown and spread wings. Black Wind Riders. They formed lines on either side of the parking lot, creating a corridor from the highway to the diner entrance. Then he arrived. The motorcycle was bigger than the others, a custom beast of chrome and black metal. The man who rode it was tall and lean. His dark hair pulled back, his face hidden behind sunglasses despite the overcast sky. He wore a leather vest over a black shirt, and even from a distance, Sarah could see the president's patch on his chest. Wolf Carter. He dismounted slowly, deliberately. Another biker handed him something, a bouquet of white lilies, at least 2 dozen, wrapped in simple paper. Sarah's breath caught. The same flowers that had appeared on her doorstep. Wolf walked toward the diner, his boots crunching on the snow-dusted pavement. The other bikers remained perfectly still, watching. Not menacing, not celebrating, just waiting. Sarah's survival instinct finally kicked in. She moved to lock the door, but her hands wouldn't cooperate. Before she could reach it, Wolf was there pulling it open. Sarah Miller. His voice was deep, rough around the edges. She nodded, not trusting herself to speak. He stepped inside and removed his sunglasses. His eyes were gray, lined with exhaustion, and something else, profound sadness. He looked at her for a long moment, and Sarah saw her own pain reflected back at her. "I'm Marcus Carter," he said quietly. "People call me Wolf. I know who you are. Then you know why I'm here." He held out the lilies. "These were my wife's favorite, and Rebecca, his voice cracked slightly. He cleared his throat. She loved white lilies." Sarah took the flowers with trembling hands. They were real fresh, probably cost a fortune this time of year. "I'm sorry about your wife," she said. I saw her, but she was already." "I know." Wolf's jaw tightened. "You saved my daughter. That's what matters. You went into a storm that killed my wife, and you brought Lily out alive. There aren't words for that kind of debt. I didn't do it for." "I know that too." He gestured toward the window, toward the silent army of bikers outside. "We came to pay our respects, to say thank you properly." Sarah watched as the bikers began moving. Each one reached into their jacket or vest and pulled out a single white lily. They approached the diner in silence, placing their flowers on the steps on the windowsills along the railing of the small porch. One by one, 200 flowers appeared, transforming the shabby diner into something almost beautiful. "My brothers and sisters wanted to show you what it means when someone saves one of ours," Wolf said. "You gave me back my daughter. You gave her a future. That makes you family." "I'm not," Sarah's voice broke. "I'm not a good person. You should know that. 5 years ago, I know about your brother," Wolf interrupted gently. "I know about the accident. I know you went to prison. I know everything, Sarah." She looked up at him, tears burning her eyes. "Then you know I don't deserve." "Deserve." Wolf's laugh was bitter. "I just did 18 months for killing a man in a bar fight. Half my club has records longer than their arms. We don't talk about deserving. We talk about what you do when it matters. And when it mattered, you saved my baby girl." He pulled something from his pocket, a photograph. He handed it to Sarah. It showed Lily in a hospital bed, awake and alert, clutching a stuffed bear. Someone had written on the back, "Thank you for my tomorrow." Sarah pressed her hand to her mouth, trying to hold back a sob. "Keep it," Wolf said. "Remember that you did something that can't be undone. Something good." Outside, the bikers were mounting their motorcycles again. The visit was ending as quickly as it had begun. But as Wolf turned to leave, Sarah grabbed his arm. "Wait, your wife, she was running, wasn't she, from someone?" Wolf's expression darkened. "Yeah, she was. Is Lily safe now?" He met her eyes, and Sarah saw the truth there before he spoke. "Not yet." Sarah watched as Wolf Carter rejoined his club, the roar of 200 motorcycles shattering the morning quiet. As they thundered away, she stood in the doorway of the Route 9 diner, surrounded by lilies, holding the photograph of a baby she had saved. Her fingers found the old pocket watch in her jacket. For the first time in 5 years, its weight felt different. Not lighter. She would always carry the burden of her brother's death, but balanced somehow by something else. Something that felt like purpose. She didn't yet understand what Wolf meant when he said Lily wasn't safe. She didn't know the depths of violence and loyalty she would soon be plunged into. She didn't realize that saving one life would demand she risk her own again and again. Sarah Miller only knew that when she heard a baby crying in a blizzard, she had chosen to act. And whatever came next, whatever price she had to pay, that choice had been the right one. The FBI arrived 2 hours after the Black Wind Riders left. Agent Elena Chen was small, sharp-eyed, and clearly annoyed. Her partner, Agent Morrison, was tall and silent, taking notes while Chen paced the diner, her heels clicking on the linoleum like precise gunshots. 200 members of a known criminal organization show up at your workplace, and you didn't think to call the police. Chen's voice was ice. Sarah wiped down the counter for the 3rd time. The diner smelled of flowers and motorcycle exhaust. "They brought lilies. It wasn't exactly a raid. Marcus Carter is under federal investigation. His wife was a person of interest in a trafficking case." Chen stopped pacing, fixing Sarah with a stare. "And now she's dead. You don't find that convenient?" "Convenient?" Sarah's temper flared. "A woman died. A baby almost froze to death. Where's the convenience in that?" Morrison spoke for the first time. "We believe Rebecca Carter was trying to turn state's witness. She had information about routes, contacts, distribution networks. 3 days before she died, she contacted our office. The words landed like stones in Sarah's stomach. You think someone killed her, made it look like an accident? We think the storm was real, but opportunity makes for strange coincidences, Chen said. And now Wolf Carter is making a very public show of gratitude. Maybe that's all it is. Or maybe he's using you to send a message to whoever killed his wife. What message? That he knows, that he's watching, that he's coming for them. Chen leaned against the counter. Has he contacted you since this morning? Sarah thought about the photograph in her pocket. Lily's face smiling up at her, the words on the back, "Thank you for my tomorrow." No, Chen didn't look convinced, but she handed Sarah a card. When he does not, when you call me. These people are dangerous, Miss Miller, even the grateful ones. After they left, Sarah locked up early. The diner smelled like lilies, overwhelming and sweet. She'd had to throw most of them away. There were too many, and they were already wilting in the heat. She was walking to her truck when a motorcycle pulled up beside her. Not Wolf, a woman. Older, with silver streaking her dark hair and sharp lines around her eyes. Her jacket marked her as Black Wind Riders, but her patch said Road Captain. Name's Samantha, the woman said, cutting the engine. People call me Raven. Wolf sent me. Sarah's hand tightened on her keys. Why? To talk. Somewhere private. Raven glanced around the empty parking lot. Your place or mine? 20 minutes later, they sat in Sarah's trailer. Raven accepted the offered coffee but didn't drink it. Just held the mug like she needed something to do with her hands. Rebecca called me the night she died, Raven said without preamble. She was scared. Said someone had found out she'd talked to the FBI. Said she was taking Lily and running. Who found out? That's the question, isn't it? Raven's expression was grim. Could be the people she was going to testify against. Could be someone in our club who didn't want that heat. Could be the FBI themselves. They're not above cleaning up loose ends. Sarah felt cold. What does this have to do with me? Wolf's been tracking Rebecca's last movements. The crash site, the angle of impact, the road conditions. None of it makes sense for an accident. Someone ran her off the road. Then he should go to the police. Raven laughed bitter and sharp. The same police who've been trying to put him away for 10 years. The same ones who'd love any excuse to violate his parole. She set down the coffee. No, Wolf settles his own debts. That's insane. He'll go back to prison. Maybe, if he gets caught. Raven leaned forward. But here's the thing. Lily's still in danger. Whoever killed Rebecca did it to stop her from talking. As long as that threat exists, that baby isn't safe. Child Services has her now, but they're processing foster placement. Wolf's got a record. His parole terms won't let him take custody yet. Sarah's chest tightened. Where is she? County facility 40 minutes from here. Social worker named Mrs. Patterson has the case. Raven pulled out a folded paper and set it on the table. Wolf wants to know if you'd consider being Lily's emergency foster placement. Temporary just until he can get his custody rights. You're joking. I'm not. You saved her life. You have no record of violence. You're employed, housed, and the only person Lily's been comfortable with since Rebecca died. Raven's eyes were steady. The social worker would approve it if you applied. Sarah stared at the paper. An application for emergency foster care. Her mind reeled. This is crazy. I work 60-hour weeks. I live in a trailer. I'm barely keeping myself together. You kept Lily alive through a blizzard. I think you can handle a few weeks. Raven stood. Think about it, but think fast. Wolf's going after whoever killed Rebecca. When he does, things are going to get messy. That little girl needs to be somewhere safe. With me, Sarah's laugh was hollow. I'm the woman who killed her own brother. Raven paused at the door. And now you're the woman who saved someone else's daughter. Maybe it's time you decided which one defines you. After Raven left, Sarah sat in the silence of her trailer, staring at the application. Outside, night was falling, and with it came fresh snow. Small flakes drifting past her window like ghosts. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Please, she knows your voice. She stops crying when she hears it. W. Sarah closed her eyes. In her mind, she saw Lily's tiny hand clutching her finger. Felt the weight of that trust, that innocence. Her fingers touched the old pocket watch in her jacket, the timepiece that had once belonged to her brother. She hadn't been able to save Matthew, but Lily was still here, still breathing. She picked up her phone and dialed the number on the social worker's card. Lily moved into Sarah's trailer 3 days later. The social worker, Mrs. Patterson, a round woman with kind eyes and sensible shoes, walked through the tiny space checking smoke detectors and cabinet locks. Sarah had spent 48 hours cleaning baby-proofing and setting up a borrowed crib in the corner of her bedroom. It's small, Mrs. Patterson said. But it's clean and safe. That's what matters. She handed Lily to Sarah and the baby immediately stopped fussing, her tiny fingers wrapping around Sarah's collar. See, she knows you. Sarah felt the weight of responsibility settle over her like a physical thing. 6 months old, so small, so vulnerable. I'll check in weekly, Mrs. Patterson continued, and Mr. Carter's parole officer has been notified. No unsupervised visits, but he can see her with you present. After she left, Sarah stood in her trailer, holding Lily, suddenly terrified. What had she done? She didn't know anything about babies. She worked nights. She could barely take care of herself. But Lily looked up at her with Rebecca's dark eyes and smiled. Okay, Sarah whispered. Okay, we'll figure this out. The first week was chaos. Sleepless nights, formula mixing, diaper changes. At the diner, Laura covered some of Sarah's shifts. Raven stopped by twice with supplies and advice. Wolf came once sitting stiffly in Sarah's cramped living room, holding his daughter with the desperate gentleness of a man who'd lost everything. Thank you, he said quietly as Lily gripped his finger. I know this isn't easy. Are you any closer to finding who? Sarah stopped glancing at the baby. Wolf's jaw tightened. We're working on it. That was 8 days ago. Now Sarah was driving through fresh snow on Route 9. Lily secured in a car seat behind her when she saw the motorcycles ahead. Not black windriders. Different patches, different colors. They were blocking the road. 3 bikes spread across both lanes. Sarah's heart lurched. She slowed her, mind racing. The abandoned truck stop was a mile ahead. Behind her, nothing but empty highway. The bikers didn't move. She grabbed her phone. No signal. The storm that had rolled in an hour ago was disrupting everything. She was alone. One of the bikers, a massive man with a red beard, dismounted and walked toward her truck. Sarah locked the doors, her pulse hammering. He knocked on her window. Sarah Miller. She didn't answer. We just want to talk about Wolf Carter, about what his wife knew. In the backseat, Lily started to cry. I don't know anything, Sarah said through the glass. Then you're going to help us find out. Redbeard's smile was cruel. That baby's good leverage. Terror shot through Sarah's veins. She slammed the truck into reverse, but another motorcycle had appeared behind her, cutting off her escape. She was boxed in. Redbeard reached for the door handle. Sarah made a choice. She yanked the wheel hard right and floored the accelerator. The truck lurched off the road, plowing through the shallow ditch and onto the snowy field beyond. The bikers shouted, scrambling for their motorcycles, but Sarah had a head start. The truck fishtailed wildly. Lily screamed. Sarah fought the wheel, her breath coming in sharp gasps. The old truck wasn't built for off-roading, but it was heavy and had four-wheel drive. She aimed for the tree line 100 yards ahead. Behind her, headlights appeared. The motorcycles were faster, gaining ground. Sarah's mind raced. The abandoned truck stop. Wolf had mentioned it once, said his club used it as a neutral meeting point. If she could reach it, if any of his people were there. She burst through the tree line onto a service road, the truck's undercarriage scraping. The truck stop appeared ahead, dark and empty-looking. But there in the back lot, 4 motorcycles with the crown skull insignia. Sarah laid on the horn and flashed her lights. The pursuing bikes were right behind her now. She could see Redbeard in her mirror, reaching into his jacket. Then the truck stop's garage door exploded open. Black windriders poured out. Wolf in front, Raven beside him. They spread across the lot, cutting off the pursuers. Sarah slammed on the brakes, the truck sliding to a stop. She twisted around to check Lily, who was crying but unhurt, still strapped safely in her seat. Wolf appeared at her window. You hurt? His face was stone, but his eyes were wild with fear. Sarah shook her head, her whole body trembling. Stay in the truck. His eyes were ice. Lock the doors. Don't come out until I tell you. What happened next was fast and brutal. Shouts, the crack of something hard hitting metal. A gunshot that made Sarah flinch and cover Lily with her body. Then silence. Wolf opened her door, blood on his knuckles. They're gone, for now. Who were they? Sarah's voice shook. The Scorpions. They work for the people Rebecca was going to testify against. Wolf looked at Lily, his face twisting. They know I'm closing in. They wanted leverage. They almost got it. But they didn't, because you drove like a demon through a snowstorm. Wolf almost smiled. Seems to be your specialty. Raven appeared, phone in hand. Cops are coming, and the FBI. This is going to get complicated. Sarah looked down at Lily, finally calming in her car seat. She thought about what Agent Chen had said, that Wolf might use her to send a message. But sitting here with this baby alive and safe, Sarah realized the message wasn't from Wolf. It was from her. She'd been given a second chance, and she wasn't going to waste it hiding. Tell me how to help, she said. The FBI arrived with sirens screaming, but the scorpions were already gone, scattered into the storm like ghosts. Agent Chen took one look at Sarah's truck, at Lily crying in the car seat, at Wolf's bloodied knuckles, and her expression went cold. "This is exactly what I warned you about," she said. Sarah held Lily close, and the baby's face pressed against her shoulder. "They came for her. What was I supposed to do?" "Call the police, not drive to a biker gang for protection." Chen turned to Wolf. "You're on parole, Mr. Carter. Being present at a violent altercation violates your terms. Saving a baby from kidnappers violates my terms." Wolf's voice was dangerously quiet. Morrison stepped between them. "We've got 3 scorpions in custody. They're talking Carter, saying you've been running your own investigation, interfering with a federal case. My wife is dead." Wolf's composure cracked. "Someone murdered her. You think I'm going to sit back and wait for you to do nothing? We're building a case." Too slow. Raven appeared from the garage, her phone in hand. "We've got names, locations. The Scorpions run distribution for the Vulov Syndicate, Russians out of Billings." "Rebecca had evidence," Wolf said. "Texts, photos, shipping manifests. She was their bookkeeper before she met me. She knew everything." Chen's expression sharpened. "Where's this evidence?" "That's what everyone wants to know." Rebecca hid it before she ran. Somewhere she thought was safe. Sarah's mind raced, pieces clicking together. The car. Did anyone search the car thoroughly? Everyone turned to look at her. "After I got Lily out, I didn't look at anything else. I was focused on keeping her alive." Sarah's heart pounded. "But what if Rebecca hid something in the car, something the police missed?" Chen and Morrison exchanged glances. "The vehicle's in the impound lot," Morrison said. "We went through it, but we were looking for accident evidence, not—" "Then look again," Sarah interrupted. "She was running for her life. She wouldn't have left that evidence behind. She would have kept it close." 2 hours later, they stood in the impound lot under harsh fluorescent lights. The wrecked car looked even worse in the brightness. The driver's side completely destroyed, the interior still stained with Rebecca's blood. Sarah hung back, holding Lily, not wanting to get closer to that tomb. Raven and 2 other Black Wind members worked alongside the FBI, pulling apart seats, checking panels, examining every inch. Wolf stood rigid, watching his face a mask. "Nothing," Morrison finally said, frustrated. "There's nothing here." "The car seat." Sarah's voice was quiet, but it cut through the noise. Everyone turned. "When I pulled Lily out, the car seat was buckled in tight, really tight, like it had been secured by someone who wanted to make absolutely sure it wouldn't move." Sarah looked at Lily in her arms. What if that's where Rebecca hid it? They'd brought the car seat to the trailer as part of Lily's things. It was sitting in Sarah's bedroom right now. The convoy that formed back to Sarah's trailer was surreal. FBI vehicles, police cars, and 4 Black Wind motorcycles all racing through the snow. When they burst through her door, Sarah felt violated and grateful all at once. Raven practically tore the car seat apart. Behind the padding, secured with duct tape, was a waterproof pouch. Inside, a thumb drive and a burner phone. Chen's hands shook slightly as she examined them. "This is it. This is what we need." "What's on it?" Wolf demanded. Morrison scrolled through the phone's photos. Shipping routes, coded conversations, photos of containers at the docks. Enough to bring down the entire network. The Vulovs, their distribution chain, their money laundering operations. It's all here. "Then arrest them," Wolf said. "Tonight, before they come for my daughter again. We need to verify everything. Coordinate with other agencies." "Tonight?" Wolf's voice was steel. "Or I handle it myself." Chen looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. "Morrison, make the calls. We move in 3 hours." As the others filed out, Sarah found herself alone with Wolf in the small kitchen. Lily had fallen asleep in her crib, exhausted from the day's trauma. "You should leave," Wolf said quietly. "Take Lily somewhere safe until this is over." "And go where?" Sarah asked. "They found me on the highway. They knew who I was. I can have Raven take you to a safe house." "No?" Sarah's voice was firm. "I'm done running." Wolf studied her face. "You've only known her a week." "It's long enough." A strange expression crossed Wolf's face. Something like recognition. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a silver pocket watch, different from Sarah's, but similar in age and style. "My father's," he said, noticing her surprise. "He was military, Marine Corps. Said a man should always know what time it is when duty calls." Sarah touched her brother's watch through her jacket. "Your father, was he part of the club?" Wolf's face hardened. "No, he died thinking I was going to follow him into the service. I did for a while, special forces, 2 tours in Afghanistan. What happened? I came back different. He couldn't understand why. Wolf's eyes were distant. Started the club with some other vets who felt the same way. It was just brotherhood at first. Then it became something else. And Rebecca, she was working for the Vulovs, not by choice. I met her at a club they owned. She wanted out. I offered protection. A ghost of a smile. Fell in love somewhere along the way. She must have been brave, Sarah said, to collect evidence against them. She was. Braver than me. Wolf's voice roughened. After Lily was born, she said she wanted a clean life for our daughter. Said the only way out was to burn it all down. A knock at the door made them both jump. Raven stepped in, her face grim. It's time. Chen says we need to move now. Someone tipped off Vulov. Wolf stood, sliding the watch back into his pocket. His eyes met Sarah's, and a world of understanding passed between them. Keep her safe, he said. I will. He paused at the doorway, looking back at the sleeping baby. If I don't come back, you will, Sarah said firmly. She needs her father. Wolf nodded once, then was gone, the door closing softly behind him. Sarah stood in the sudden silence of her trailer, listening to Lily's gentle breathing, the sound of motorcycles fading into the night. She moved to the window, watching the lights disappear down the road. The operation would happen at dawn. Federal agents raiding multiple locations across Montana, Washington, and Idaho. The Vulov syndicate dismantled in a single coordinated strike. Sarah should feel relieved. Instead, dread pooled in her stomach. She touched her brother's watch again. Matthew had always been the one who could sense trouble coming. Trust your gut, he'd told her once. It knows the truth before your brain catches up. Right now, her gut was screaming. Sarah packed a bag quickly. Formula diapers, a change of clothes for both of them. She tucked her brother's watch into the pocket of Lily's blanket, a talisman of protection. Then she bundled the sleeping baby into her car seat and carried her to the truck. The night was clear now, stars sharp as glass above the snow-covered landscape. Sarah drove carefully, avoiding the main roads. Her destination was an old hunting cabin 20 miles into the mountains, a place Matthew had taken her fishing when they were younger. No one would think to look for her there. She was 5 miles from the trailer when her headlights caught a reflection in the road ahead. Something metallic. Then another. Motorcycles, not black windriders. The Scorpions had returned, and this time they'd brought friends. Sarah's hands tightened on the wheel. There was no way around them, no side road to take. In her rearview mirror, more headlights appeared. She was trapped. She slowed the truck, mind racing. The ditch was too deep here to drive through, the woods too dense to navigate in the dark. She could try to back up, find another route, but they'd catch her before she could turn around. Her phone buzzed. A text from Wolf. Stay off Route 9, Vulov coming for you. Too late. The lead motorcycle pulled alongside her truck, the rider signaling her to stop. Sarah kept driving, but slower now, buying time to think. Another text. 5 minutes away, hold on. 5 minutes was an eternity. Sarah needed seconds. The motorcycle pulled ahead, forcing her to brake. Behind her, the others closed in. Sarah reached over to the glove compartment, her fingers finding the small canister of pepper spray she kept there. A pathetic defense, but all she had. A man stepped onto the road ahead, forcing her to stop completely. Tall, middle-aged, wearing an expensive coat that seemed out of place among the leather-clad bikers. His face was European, coldly handsome, with eyes like chips of blue ice. Victor Vulov. Sarah locked the doors as he approached her window. Lily mercifully was still asleep. Ms. Miller, Vulov tapped on the glass with the barrel of a gun. His accent was subtle but present. Please, I only want to talk. Sarah stared straight ahead, refusing to look at him. About the child, Vulov continued, and what her mother might have told you. She didn't tell me anything, Sarah said loudly through the glass. I found her dead. Yet you have her child, and Wolf Carter visits you regularly. Vulov's smile didn't reach his eyes. Coincidence, perhaps, but I am not a man who believes in coincidences. He gestured to one of his men. Open the door. The biker approached with a slim tool. Sarah's heart raced. She had seconds to decide. Her brother's voice seemed to whisper in her ear, when there's no good choice, make the bold one. Sarah threw the truck into drive and slammed on the accelerator. The vehicle lurched forward directly at Vulov. The man's eyes widened in surprise as he dove to the side, her bumper missing him by inches. The truck roared down the road, but she knew they would follow. Motorcycles were faster, more maneuverable. She couldn't outrun them for long. But she didn't need long, just 5 minutes. Sarah pushed the old truck harder than it had ever been pushed, the engine screaming as she took curves too fast. Lily woke startled by the motion and began to cry. Sarah couldn't comfort her, couldn't even look back. "It's okay, sweetheart," she called over the engine noise. "We're going to be okay." Headlights appeared in her mirror, gaining. 4 minutes. Sarah took a turn too sharply, the truck's back end fishtailing on the icy road. She fought the skid, barely keeping control. Behind her, one of the pursuing bikes wasn't so lucky, sliding out and crashing into the ditch. 3 minutes. The road narrowed as it entered a wooded stretch. Sarah knew there was an old logging trail up ahead, barely visible from the main road. If she could reach it, maybe she could hide, lose them in the trees. 2 minutes. The first shots rang out, shattering her back window. Glass rained over the baby's car seat. Lily's cries turned to screams. Sarah hunched lower over the wheel. Her only thought to keep moving, keep the truck between the bullets and her precious cargo. 1 minute. The logging trail appeared a dark gap in the trees. Sarah wrenched the wheel, the truck bouncing violently as it left the pavement. The headlights caught nothing but forest branches slapping against the windshield. She killed the lights, driving on instinct, the faint moonlight her only guide. Behind her, the motorcycles hesitated at the turn, their riders uncertain. Then came the roar of engines as they followed. Sarah's time had run out. But just as despair threatened to overwhelm her, the night erupted with sound and fury. New headlights, new engines, coming from the opposite direction. The Black Wind Riders had arrived. Wolf led them, his massive bike tearing down the logging trail like a demon unleashed. Behind him, at least 20 riders, weapons drawn. They collided with Vulov's men in a chaos of metal and leather. Sarah braked hard, turning the truck sideways to shield Lily from the mayhem. She ducked down, covering the baby with her body as gunfire erupted around them. Through the windshield, she saw Wolf dismount, moving with military precision. He spotted her truck and started toward it, his face a mask of determination. Then Vulov stepped into view, gun raised. "Wolf Carter," he called, his voice carrying over the din. "You've caused me a great deal of trouble." Wolf stopped, hands slightly raised. "Let them go, Victor. This is between you and me." No, Vulov's aim was steady. "Your wife betrayed me. That makes it about all of you, the child included." Sarah watched in horror as Wolf's gaze flickered to her truck, to where Lily was hidden. In that moment of distraction, Vulov fired. Wolf staggered, clutching his side. But he didn't fall. With a roar that seemed barely human, he lunged at Vulov, tackling him to the ground. The gun discharged again, the bullet going wild. The two men grappled in the snow. Wolf's greater strength hampered by his wound. Vulov was smaller, but fought with the desperation of a man who knew his empire was crumbling. He got a hand free, reaching for the gun that had fallen nearby. A shot rang out. Vulov jerked, then went still. Standing over both men was Agent Chen, her service weapon still aimed at the Russian's chest. "Federal agent," she announced, though no one was listening. "It's over, Vulov." Wolf pushed himself up, blood staining the snow beneath him. He staggered towards Sarah's truck as FBI vehicles began arriving, their lights painting the trees in flashes of blue and red. Sarah threw open her door, Lily clutched to her chest. Wolf reached them, his face pale with pain, but his eyes clear. "You're okay," he breathed, touching Lily's face with bloodied fingers. "You're both okay." "You're shot," Sarah said, supporting him as he swayed. "We need to get you to a hospital." Wolf shook his head. "There's something I need to tell you first. About Rebecca. About why Vulov wanted Lily so badly." But before he could continue, his eyes rolled back and he collapsed into the snow at her feet. Sarah watched helplessly as paramedics loaded Wolf into an ambulance, his skin gray beneath his tattoos. Lily whimpered against her shoulder, sensing her distress. "He'll live," Chen said, appearing beside her. "He's too stubborn to die." Sarah nodded numbly. The woods around them had transformed into a surreal tableau of law enforcement activity. FBI agents securing the scene, state police processing prisoners, medical personnel tending to the wounded. "The raids were successful," Chen continued. "We got them all, the entire Vulov operation from top to bottom. Your friend's evidence was solid." "She wasn't my friend," Sarah said quietly. "I never even met her." Chen studied her face. "Yet here you are, bleeding for her child, ready to die for her secrets." "I was just doing what anyone would do." Chen's smile was small but genuine. "I've been in law enforcement for 15 years, Ms. Miller. Trust me when I tell you that what you did, what you're still doing, is far from common." Sarah looked down at Lily, now sleeping, despite the chaos around them. "What happens now, to her, I mean?" "For tonight, you remain her guardian. Tomorrow there will be hearings, paperwork. Child Services will reassess the situation with Carter's legal status. And if he doesn't make it," Chen's expression softened, "let's cross that bridge if we come to it." As the night wore on, Sarah found herself sitting in a hospital waiting room. Lily asleep in a portable crib beside her. Wolf was in surgery, the bullet having nicked his liver. The prognosis was good, but the wait was agonizing. Raven arrived near dawn, her leather jacket torn a bandage on her temple. She sat heavily next to Sarah. "Quite a night," she said, her voice rough with exhaustion. "Is everyone?" "We lost two, Johnson and Tiny. Good people." Raven's eyes were red-rimmed. "But we got the bastards. All of them." Sarah nodded, not knowing what to say. What comfort could she offer to a woman mourning her brothers in arms? "Wolf told me about your brother," Raven said suddenly. "About the accident." Sarah tensed. "What about it?" "He said you carry his watch, that you look at it every time you make a decision, like you're asking his permission to keep living." Sarah said nothing, but her hand moved unconsciously to her pocket. "My husband died 6 years ago," Raven continued. "Motorcycle accident. Stupid preventable. For 2 years I kept his wedding ring on a chain around my neck. Touched it whenever I felt lost." "What happened after 2 years?" "I met Wolf. He was building something, a family for people who didn't have one anymore. He said I could keep mourning the dead, or I could start protecting the living." Raven looked pointedly at Lily. "Seems to me you've already made the same choice." A doctor appeared in the doorway. "Family of Marcus Carter." Raven stood immediately. Sarah hesitated, then rose as well, Lily in her arms. "He's stable," the doctor said. "The surgery went well. He's asking for you, both of you." Wolf looked smaller somehow against the white hospital sheets, his imposing frame diminished by tubes and monitors. But his eyes were clear when they found Sarah and Lily. "You're okay," he said, his voice a rasp. "We're fine," Sarah confirmed, bringing Lily closer so he could see her. "Everyone's fine." Wolf relaxed visibly. "Did Chen tell you about the raids?" "They got them all," Raven said. "The warehouses, the distribution centers, the money launderers. The whole operation. And Victor, dead," Sarah said. "Agent Chen shot him when he tried to grab his gun." Wolf nodded, one satisfaction and something like grief passing across his face. "Rebecca would have been glad." "I'm sorry about your men," Sarah said to both of them. "They knew the risks," Wolf replied, though his jaw tightened. "They chose to be there." A nurse appeared, reminding them that visiting time was limited. As Raven stepped out to give them privacy, Wolf beckoned Sarah closer. "There's something you need to know," he said. "About Rebecca, about why Vulov wanted Lily so badly." Sarah waited, a sense of foreboding building in her chest. Rebecca wasn't just Vulov's bookkeeper, she was his daughter. The revelation hit Sarah like a physical blow. His daughter. Wolf nodded grimly. She ran away at 17, changed her name, tried to build a new life. But he found her, forced her to work for him. When she met me, she saw a way out. "And Lily is his granddaughter." Sarah whispered, the pieces falling into place. That's why he was so determined. In his twisted way, he thought he was reclaiming what belonged to him. His legacy. Wolf's eyes were hard. But Lily is nothing like him. She's like her mother, brave, kind, stubborn as hell. "What happens now?" Wolf's gaze shifted to his daughter sleeping peacefully in Sarah's arms. "I don't know. My parole hearing is next week. If the judge takes into account what happened tonight, maybe they'll reinstate my custody rights. And if they don't, then I hope—" Wolf stopped, seeming to struggle with the words. "I hope you'll keep her safe until I can." Before Sarah could respond, the phone in the hallway rang. A moment later, Raven burst back into the room, her face ashen. "What is it?" Wolf demanded, trying to sit up and wincing with pain. "It's the diner," Raven said, looking at Sarah. "The Route 9 diner. It's been shot up. Scorpions who escaped the raid. They were looking for leverage, for anything to bargain with." Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. "Is anyone hurt?" "No, place was empty. But it's bad, Sarah, real bad." As Raven described the damaged windows, shattered bullet holes stitching across the walls, the neon sign that had buzzed for 30 years now. Dark, its tubes shattered. Sarah felt a strange sense of calm settle over her. The diner had been her sanctuary for 5 years, the place where she'd rebuilt her life piece by piece. Now it was caught in someone else's war collateral damage in a battle she'd never asked to join. Yet holding Lily, watching Wolf fight through his pain to reach for his daughter's hand, Sarah realized she had chosen this. The moment she'd stepped into that blizzard, she'd chosen to be part of something larger than herself. And despite everything, she couldn't bring herself to regret it. "We'll rebuild," Wolf said, suddenly his eyes meeting hers. "All of it. Better than before." "We?" Sarah asked. "The Black Wind Riders pay their debts." Wolf's voice was firm despite his weakness. "And we owe you more than we can ever repay." Sarah looked down at Lily, then at the man who'd nearly died protecting them both. In their faces, she saw possibility, a future she hadn't dared imagine since the night her brother died. "Okay," she said softly, "we rebuild." Outside the hospital window, dawn was breaking over the mountains, painting the snow-covered landscape in shades of gold and promise. In Sarah's pocket, her brother's watch seemed lighter somehow, as if time itself had finally begun moving forward again. The sound of hammers echoed across Route 9 for 3 weeks straight. They came at dawn, 30, sometimes 40 black wind riders trading their leather for work gloves. Raven organized the crews. Wolf, still recovering from his gunshot wound, but stubborn as ever, worked alongside them, measuring, cutting, welding. Others arrived with supplies, new windows, fresh paint, lumber chrome fixtures. Sarah watched from across the parking lot, Lily on her hip, as the diner transformed. The building that had been her sanctuary for 5 years, reduced to a bullet-riddled shell by the Scorpion's attack, was being reborn. "You don't have to do this," she'd told Wolf that first morning. "Yeah," he'd replied, pulling on work gloves, the effort making him wince as it pulled at his healing wound. "We do." The locals kept their distance at first, suspicious of the bikers, frightened by the violence that had touched their quiet town. But suspicion faded as days passed. The bikers bought supplies from the hardware store, ate at the other diner in town, paid for everything in cash. Some brought their families, wives, kids, old ladies who set up folding chairs and watched their men work. By the second week, townspeople started showing up with coffee and sandwiches. By the third week, a few local contractors joined the effort, unable to resist a good project. Sheriff Frank Wilson drove by every morning, watching with cautious approval. After the fifth day, he parked his cruiser and walked over to where Wolf was installing new window frames. "Never thought I'd see black wind riders wielding hammers instead of chains," Frank said, hands on his belt. Wolf didn't look up from his work. "First time for everything, Sheriff." Frank surveyed the progress. "FBI cleared you, you know. Agent Chen's report said you were instrumental in taking down Vulov. That why you're here, to deliver good news?" "Partly." Frank shifted his weight. "Your parole hearing's been moved up. Next Monday instead of next month. Judge wants to reassess in light of recent events." Now Wolf did look up, his eyes sharp. "And you're telling me this because I'll be there, testifying." Frank held Wolf's gaze. "About what I saw, about what you did." "And what's that?" "A man trying to protect his family." Frank glanced towards Sarah, who stood nearby with Lily. "A man who chose to help law enforcement instead of taking matters into his own hands. That counts for something." Wolf's jaw worked, emotions playing across his face. "Thanks." Frank nodded once. "Don't make me regret it." He turned to leave, then paused. "One more thing. Agent Chen found something interesting in Vulov's personal files. Seems he had a federal judge on his payroll, same judge who sentenced you 18 months ago." Wolf went completely still. "You saying my conviction was fixed?" "I'm not saying anything official." Frank's expression was careful. "But there might be grounds for a review." As the sheriff walked away, Sarah moved closer to Wolf, who stood frozen, the hammer hanging loose in his grip. "What does that mean for you?" she asked quietly. "Could mean a lot of things." Wolf's voice was controlled, but his eyes burned with something fierce. "Could mean I get my record cleared. Could mean I get full custody of Lily without jumping through hoops." "That's good, right?" Wolf looked at her, a question in his face. "Yeah, good for me. But what about you?" Sarah glanced down at Lily, who was playing with the collar of her shirt. In 3 short weeks, the baby had become the center of her world. The thought of letting her go created a physical ache. "She belongs with her father." Sarah said the words, feeling like stones in her mouth. Wolf studied her face, seeing more than she wanted him to. "We'll figure it out," he said finally. "Together." The diner rose from its ruins like something new. Fresh siding replaced the bullet-scarred walls. New windows gleamed in the morning sun. Inside, they'd refinished the counters, replaced torn booths, updated the kitchen equipment. Raven had somehow sourced a vintage jukebox that now stood in the corner, filled with classic country and rock records. But the crown jewel was the sign. Wolf had commissioned it specially, a custom neon masterpiece that combined the diner's original design with something new. The words Route 9 Diner glowed in warm yellow, but beneath it in smaller script, Home of the Guardian. "Guardian," Sarah had asked when she saw the design. "That's what you are," Wolf said simply. "You guard people. You saved Lily. You drove through hell to keep her safe. That means something." On the morning of the reopening, Sarah stood in the parking lot wearing a clean apron, Lily in a carrier on her chest. The baby was 8 months old now, stronger, smiling more. The custody hearing was scheduled for that afternoon. Wolf's parole officer had recommended he regain full custody and Sarah would transition back to being just the woman who'd saved her. Just as if there was anything just about it. "You ready?" Laura asked, grinning. She'd stayed through everything, refusing to abandon her post. "No," Sarah admitted, "but let's do it anyway." The grand reopening drew a crowd, locals, truckers, reporters, and of course the Black Wind Riders. 200 motorcycles lined Route 9 just like they had that first morning. But this time there was no fear. Kids ran between the bikes while their parents took photos. Raven organized the raffle proceeds going to the local children's hospital. Wolf arrived last alone this time, carrying a small frame. He found Sarah inside, arranging glasses behind the counter. "Got something for you," he said. The frame held a photo one Sarah hadn't known existed. It showed her in the hospital, exhausted and frostbitten, her ruined hand wrapped in bandages. But she was smiling down at Lily, who was clutching her finger with tiny, perfect determination. "The paramedic took it," Wolf explained. "She sent it to me after the news broke. Thought you should have it." Sarah's throat tightened. In the photo, she didn't look like an ex-con or a woman haunted by guilt. She looked like exactly what Wolf had called her, a guardian. "Hang it above the register," Wolf said. "Reminds people what this place is about." The photo went up, and beside it, Wolf placed a shadow box containing a single white lily preserved eternal. "For Rebecca," Sarah asked softly. "For all of us who needed a second chance." Wolf looked around the rebuilt diner. "She made mistakes. I made mistakes. You made mistakes. But in the end, what matters is what we do when someone needs us." The day blurred into a celebration. Coffee flowed freely. Laura's pancakes disappeared as fast as she could make them. The jukebox played old Merle Haggard and Johnny Cash songs. Children laughed. Bikers traded stories with truckers. Agent Chen even stopped by off-duty bay and managed a smile when Sarah served her pie. "You found a place for yourself," Chen observed, watching Sarah move comfortably through the crowded diner. "I've always been here," Sarah replied. "Just never really belonged before." "And now?" Sarah glanced at Wolf, who was showing Lily to an elderly couple, the baby giggling as he bounced her gently. "Now I have something to protect." Chen's eyes followed her gaze. "The hearing's at 2, right?" Sarah nodded, her chest tightening. "For what it's worth," Chen said, setting down her fork. "I've seen a lot of families in this job. Some work on paper, but not in reality. Some aren't official, but are stronger than anything legal documents could create." She looked directly at Sarah. "You three, you're the real thing. He's her father, and you're her guardian." Chen stood, dropping money on the table. "Sometimes a child needs both." As the afternoon approached, the crowd began to thin. Sarah felt time slipping away like sand through her fingers. At 1:30, she went to the back room to change for the hearing, removing her apron with hands that wouldn't quite stay steady. She stared at herself in the small bathroom mirror. 5 years ago, she'd been a different woman, reckless, careless, with the things that mattered. The accident that killed her brother had shattered her into pieces, and she'd spent every day since then trying to live with the jagged edges. Now, looking at her reflection, she saw someone new. Still broken, perhaps, but the pieces had rearranged themselves into a shape that could hold others, protect them. She reached into her pocket for Matthew's watch, the ritual so ingrained she hardly thought about it anymore. But this time, instead of asking for forgiveness, she silently thanked him. For the lessons that had come too late, for the strength she'd found in her darkest moment. When she emerged, Wolf was waiting Lily in his arms. He'd changed into the closest thing he had to formal wear. Clean jeans, a black button-down shirt, his leather vest conspicuously absent. Without the club insignia, he looked less like an outlaw and more like what he was, a father who would do anything for his child. "Ready?" he asked. "No," Sarah answered honestly, "but let's go." The courthouse was a stark brick building in the center of town. They entered through the main doors, Lily between them. Sarah hadn't been inside since her own sentencing 5 years earlier. The memories surged back, the smell of polished wood, the hushed voices, the weight of judgment. "You okay?" Wolf asked quietly. "Yeah, just ghosts." They sat side by side on a hard wooden bench outside the courtroom waiting to be called. Wolf bounced Lily gently on his knee, the baby fascinated by the new surroundings. Sarah watched them together, memorizing every detail. The way Lily's tiny hand wrapped around Wolf's tattooed finger. The softness in his eyes when he looked at his daughter. This was right. This was how it should be. So why did it feel like she was losing everything? "Sarah Miller," a clerk appeared in the hallway. "Marcus Carter, Judge Reynolds will see you now." The courtroom was smaller than the one where Sarah had been sentenced, but no less intimidating. The judge, an older woman with silver hair and piercing blue eyes, watched as they took their seats at the table. Mrs. Patterson from Social Services sat nearby, her expression professionally neutral. This is an unusual case. Judge Reynolds began scanning the documents before her. Mr. Carter, I see the circumstances of your parole have changed significantly since our last review. Yes, Your Honor. Wolf replied, his voice steady. I have letters here from Sheriff Wilson, Agent Elena Chen of the FBI, and your parole officer all recommending full reinstatement of your custody rights. That's quite a turnaround for a man who was until recently considered a high-risk offender. Wolf sat straight on. I've made choices I regret, Your Honor, but I've also made changes for my daughter. The judge turned her attention to Sarah. Ms. Miller, you've been serving as Lily's emergency foster placement for the past month. Mrs. Patterson's report indicates an exemplary home environment, despite modest means. It also notes a strong bond has formed between you and the child. Sarah's throat felt tight. Yes, Your Honor. And how do you feel about Mr. Carter's petition for full custody? Every instinct screamed at Sarah to fight to plead to hold on to the baby who had become her reason for living. But she looked at Wolf at the naked hope in his eyes and knew what she had to do. Lily belongs with her father. She said the words coming out clear despite the pain behind them. He's a good man. He'll protect her with his life. I support his petition fully. Something flickered across the judge's face, surprise, perhaps, or approval. Mr. Carter, what are your intentions regarding Ms. Miller's relationship with Lily should you receive full custody? Wolf looked at Sarah, his eyes intense. Lily needs Sarah in her life. I'm not trying to take my daughter away from her. I'm asking that we find a way for Lily to have both of us. You're proposing some form of shared custody arrangement. Yes, Your Honor, if that's possible. The judge removed her glasses, studying them both. Normally, this court would be hesitant to grant such an arrangement between parties with no legal or biological connection. However, the circumstances here are anything but normal. She shuffled her papers. Ms. Miller literally saved this child's life at great personal risk. Mr. Carter and Miss Miller have both demonstrated extraordinary commitment to Lily's welfare, even in the face of considerable danger. Mrs. Patterson's report indicates Lily is thriving under their shared care. Judge Reynolds replaced her glasses. It is the opinion of this court that Lily Carter's best interest would be served by maintaining strong relationships with both of you. Therefore, I am granting Mr. Carter's petition for custody with Ms. Miller to retain substantial visitation rights equivalent to a co-parenting arrangement. Sarah felt lightheaded, the words not quite registering. There is, however, one condition, the judge continued. Ms. Miller's current residence is not suitable for long-term childcare. The court would require you to secure more appropriate housing within 6 months. I understand, Sarah said, though she had no idea how she would afford anything better than her trailer on her diner wages. If that's a hardship, Ms. Miller, there are housing assistance programs. It won't be a problem, Wolf interrupted. I've already made arrangements. Sarah looked at him in confusion. The judge raised an eyebrow. Would you care to elaborate, Mr. Carter? I own property outside town, 5 acres with a small house. It was my father's. I've been renovating it for Lily. Wolf's eyes met Sarah's. There's room for both of you. I can't, Sarah began. It's not charity, Wolf said firmly. It's family for Lily. The judge watched this exchange with interest. Well, that would certainly satisfy the court's requirements, assuming Miss Miller is agreeable. She gathered her papers. I'll expect a follow-up report in 6 months. Until then, the shared arrangement will be probationary. She struck her gavel once. Court adjourned. Outside in the bright afternoon sun, Sarah stood motionless, trying to process what had just happened. She hadn't lost Lily. She wasn't being pushed aside. She was being invited in. You could have told me, she said finally as Wolf strapped Lily into her car seat. Wasn't sure it was what you wanted, he replied, not meeting her eyes. Didn't want you to feel trapped. Trapped? With me, with the club. He straightened, finally looking at her. My life isn't simple, Sarah. The Vulov Syndicate is finished, but there are always enemies, always threats. Choosing to be part of that, it's a lot to ask. You're not asking, Sarah pointed out. You're offering. Same thing, different words. Wolf's jaw tightened. I don't want gratitude. I don't want you to feel obligated because of what happened with Rebecca or the diner, or any of it. He stopped frustrated. I want you to choose freely. Sarah looked at Lily contentedly, playing with a small stuffed bear in her car seat. Then at Wolf, this complicated man who had suffered and caused suffering, who had killed and saved lives, who loved his daughter with a fierce, uncompromising devotion. I already chose, she said quietly. The night I heard Lily crying in the storm, I just didn't know what I was choosing. Wolf's expression softened. And now I do. Sarah touched Matthew's watch in her pocket, a gesture that had become less about guilt and more about connection. My brother used to say, we don't get to pick what breaks us, but we do get to pick what rebuilds us. Lily rebuilt me. You rebuilt my diner. Maybe, she hesitated, maybe we can rebuild something else too, something new. Wolf didn't smile, he rarely did, but his eyes warmed in a way Sarah was beginning to recognize. I'd like that, he said simply. As sunset painted the sky orange and pink over Route 9, the diner glowed with new life. The neon sign cast warm light across the parking lot, welcoming travelers and locals alike. Inside, the last customers of the day lingered over coffee and pie, reluctant to leave the comfort of a place that had risen from destruction. Sarah moved between tables, refilling cups, exchanging greetings. She felt Wolf's eyes on her from where he sat at the counter, Lily sleeping peacefully in his arms. Tomorrow they would begin moving her things to the house outside town. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new adjustments. But tonight was for savoring this moment of balance, of peace, hard-won. The bell above the door chimed as an old man entered, his trucker's cap pulled low against the evening chill. We're about to close, Sarah began, then smiled. But there's fresh coffee if you want it. Much obliged, the man said, settling at the counter. Been driving all day. Saw your sign from the highway. Something about it just called to me. Sarah poured his coffee, aware of Wolf watching the exchange, his posture relaxed but alert, always the protector. This place has a story, doesn't it? The trucker asked, warming his hands around the mug. Feels like somewhere important, somewhere with history. Sarah glanced at the photo above the register, herself holding Lily in the hospital, the preserved Lily beside it, and at the man and baby across the counter, the family she had never expected to find. Yes, she said, it does have a story. Care to share it? She smiled. It's a long one, and it's still being written. Later, after the doors were locked and the lights dimmed, Sarah and Wolf stood in the parking lot looking up at the sign that now proclaimed this place the home of the Guardian. Lily slept against Wolf's chest, her tiny breaths forming small clouds in the cool night air. Rebecca would have loved this, Wolf said softly. Seeing her daughter safe. Seeing her sacrifice means something. She'd be proud of you, Sarah replied, of what you've built from the ashes. Wolf looked down at the sleeping baby, then at Sarah. We built it, all of us, even those who aren't here anymore. A distant rumble drew their attention to the highway, where a group of motorcycles appeared, their headlights cutting through the gathering dusk. Black windriders returning from a ride, coming home to the place that had become more than just a diner, a sanctuary, a symbol, a promise kept. Ready? Wolf asked, nodding towards Sarah's truck. Yes, she said, and meant it completely. As they drove away, following the winding path of Route 9 toward their new home, Sarah thought about the journey that had brought her here. 5 years of penance for one terrible night. One moment of courage in a blizzard. A baby's cry that had changed everything. The old pocket watch rested in her pocket, no longer a weight, but an anchor connecting her past to her present. Matthew would always be a part of her, his absence a space she carried. But now there were other spaces being filled by Lily's laughter, by Wolf's quiet strength, by a family forged not in blood but in choice. The truck crested a hill, and below them, nestled among pine trees, a small house came into view. Lights glowed in the windows. Raven and some of the others had gone ahead to prepare for their arrival. Motorcycles lined the gravel drive, their chrome gleaming in the last light of day. Home, Wolf said the word somewhere between a question and a statement. Sarah reached across the seat, her hand finding his. Home, she confirmed. She had been running for so long from her guilt, from connection, from the possibility of causing more pain. But running had only led her in a circle back to Route 9, back to a moment where she had to choose between safety and salvation. This time she chose differently. This time she chose to stay, to build, to guard what mattered. As they pulled into the driveway, the front door opened, spilling light onto the porch. Raven stood in the doorway, others visible behind her, waiting, welcoming. Sarah Miller stepped out of the truck, took Lily from Wolf's arms and walked toward the light. The weight of her brother's watch in her pocket balanced by the weight of the child against her heart. The past and the future finally in harmony. Behind them, far down the highway, the neon sign of the Route 9 diner shone like a beacon in the darkness, guiding travelers home. Home to the place where a waitress had walked into a blizzard and emerged as something more. Home to the place where broken people found wholeness in each other. Home to the Guardian.